This enormous fish comes up in the water and it just went across the surface. In the late 1990s, Wraysbury 1 was 120 acres of carp fishing paradise. Those carp at that point were without doubt the absolute icing on the UK's carp scene. Then another one topped out and it came out right over where I was fishing. Boom, I thought, I'll do 2 nights, 2 Wraysbury carp. Back and forth it goes, back and forth. For another weed bed, another weed bed. You're fishing for 40 something carp in 120 of the most amazing acres of carp ponds you could ever imagine to fish, and you just lost them. And then suddenly, beep! And I just collapsed on the back of the boat and went, here's Mary. And went, of course it's Mary. Oh, I've just caught the biggest carp in the country. Nothing is going to beat that.
Right, sorry to interrupt, but whilst I have your attention, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, would you please subscribe to our YouTube channel? We would massively appreciate it, and you will stay very much up to date with everything YouTube orientated that we do. Secondly, and as well as asking you for a little favour, we have a little something that might be of interest to you. If you click the link in description or scan the QR code on screen, you will be entitled to 50% off your first 3 months as a Cypography member. And as a Cypography member, you will get access to over 1,000 videos and several other member perks.
Arsenal's Patrick Vieira faces a disciplinary hearing after his sending off at West Ham.
Police consider criminal charges against Lord Archer for asking a friend to lie. China's first rocket heads into space.
The Great TV Switch-Off plans are announced to turn off our current TV sets, possibly within 6 years, as digital takes over.
You can still see the staining of the orange Pescaviva sweet corn on that one. Oh, look at that. This is the O team, isn't it? In the late 1990s, Wraysbury 1 was 120 acres of carp fishing paradise. It held the biggest carp in the country, Mary, which obviously had become very famous as it became a monster, with Pete Springate's capture, Terry Hearn's capture. It was the iconic, the most sought after fish, but it was living in one of the most difficult environments in which to carp fish. 120 acres with just 40, maybe 45 carp living in there. And they were extremely hard fish to catch because they lived in an environment that was literally hooching with natural food. They had become monsters on natural food, not on anglers' baits. So you were competing with a very difficult environment, which was extremely large. The tackle of the time was probably being tested absolutely to its maximum. We were fishing for very fit, strong fish that were capable of extreme rucks and lived in a really deep, snaggy environment. So you had Mary, you had Malins, Cluster, Mary's Mate, the Pug. Those carp at that point were without doubt the absolute icing on the UK's carp scene. The other fishery which was similar at that time would have been the Yateley fish in the Car Park Lake and in the North Lake, Basil and Heather the Leather. But you had in Wraysbury 1 at that point, you had several of the sort of the celebrity carp of that generation, if you like, living right there in that 120 acres. But my word, they were some serious carp to catch if you could get them. It's the summer of 1999. It's not my first trip to Wraysbury 1, but it's the first time that things become a bit more significant. I arrived at the lake early in the summer. Season was in full swing, a few fish had been caught, and there was a southerly blowing, and I thought, right, I've got a plan. Southerly's blowing, I reckon the fish are going to be in the North Lake, and I reckon they're going to be up towards the top of the North Lake. So I set off with my wheelbarrow, my inflatable boat, my kit, and I headed up towards a swim called Springate's Point. Pushed the barrow into Springate's Point, and I thought it looked absolutely fantastic. So I was very, very new to Wraysbury. It was a very big place. It was a lot to get your head around, but I thought, well, I know what's going to work here. What's going to work here is definitely something I'd been given a little tip off by a fish called Malins the year before, and that was Tutti Frutti sweet corn from a company called Pescaviva. In 1988, I'd walked around the swimming pool and found the mighty Malins sitting amongst the snags. I peeled the top off a can of Pescaviva sweet corn, and I trickled a few of the golden grains in, bright orangey colour. They went down in the water, and Malins literally stopped in its tracks, and it devoured every single grain of sweet corn that I threw at it. And I thought, my God, he really liked that. And so in 1999, a year later, I'm there, I'm on Springate's Point, and I think, right, I'm going to set up, and I literally catapulted some sweet corn out to the left-hand side of the swim, probably as far as I could get it in the wind, 15 yards or something like that. Wasn't very far out. And then I blew up my inflatable boat, and I went out and I did my right-hand rod first, which was a bit of Vitalin, chucked a bit of Vitalin round, dropped a rig over that, and then I cast the other two down just in close. And nothing happened. Next morning, I woke up and the wind was blowing. I hadn't seen or heard anything, but what I did see that made me very excited was a superhero of the carp fishing world for me at that point, Ian Chilcott, pushing his wheelbarrow up the far side of the lake, all in a fluster, and he's bowing along, and he gets into the swim almost opposite where I'm fishing, and he's spodding out bait, and I thought, my God, I'm fishing amongst superstars here. So I had Ian Chilcott, Chile, opposite me, and I'm thinking, well, he knows what he's doing, so I'm in the right area, because he'd been fishing there a bit longer than I had, and he'd caught a fair few as well. And I thought, well, this is looking absolutely cock on. And I got up a tree and I watched the water and I watched the water, and I didn't see anything, but that southerly was still blowing. It still felt like I was in the right area. And after I'd been up the tree for about 3 hours, I had such bad pins and needles that I thought either my leg was going to drop off or I'd have to get down and do something about it. So I climbed down out of the tree and I got on my bed chair, which was just set up amongst the sort of shrubbery at the back of the point. And I thought, well, I'll just have a little lay down and a kip. And I was laying there, it was probably mid-morning. What was that? I got back up my tree and I couldn't see anything in the ripple, but I thought that definitely sounded like a carp, and it wasn't far out. And the wind got up a bit more, and the wind got up a bit more, and then I started getting the odd dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee-dee on my bobbins. And I was like, huh, twitchy, up and down the tree 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times more. Ian Chilcott's still opposite me, beep, 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 beep. No. And I ended up turning the sensitivity right down on my old optonic bite alarms, because they were doing my head in so badly because they were all the little false bleeps. So I just set everything out, and I thought, well, it's probably never going to happen anyway, but I'm there, and I, then another one topped out, and it come out right over where I was fishing, and I was like, oh my God. And not only am I at Wraysbury 1, I'm on the North Lake at Wraysbury 1. There is a strong southerly blowing, and not only that, there is now a carp showing right on top of my spot that I baited with my sweet corn a couple of hours previously. And I am as twitchy as you like. And with that, beep, 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 beep. And I'm thinking, just keep calm, it's bound to be a tench. And I played this fish in, and it went round and round and round and round, up and down, up and down. It was clearly not a tench. And then in the slop that was coming up the marginal shelf, I could see this back, and it was a common. And it was, looked like a nice fish to me at that point. And I could see it was quite a dumpy, fat common. And it come in over the landing net, and in the landing net it went. And then I was looking in the landing net thinking, not only am I here at Wraysbury, opposite Ian Chilcott, fishing off Springate's Point, but I've only gone and caught one. And I looked in the net, and Ian Chilcott yells like, "What you got, mate?" I went, "A common!" Trying to retain some sort of degree of coolness, but obviously completely over the top. And he went, "What? How big is it?" And I weighed it. It was 20 pound, 20 and a few ounces. I think it was a 20 pound common. It was one of the stocky commons, and I was absolutely cock a hoop. And I got some photos of me I think I did them on the self-timer, if I remember rightly, of me holding this like 20 pound round, stocky looking Wraysbury common, and that was my first bite at Wraysbury. And oh my God, I was absolutely buzzing. And that was the last bite I had, and that was the last sight of a fish I had from that spot in that trip. So it was time to get up and move the next morning. Well, by the next morning, it had become completely apparent to me that the fish had either done the off, or the group that was on my patch of sweet corn had done the off. And although I had felt there was a chance of a second one, it wasn't to be. So the next morning, the wind had died off, and I thought, right, it's time to move. So I packed up my gear and loaded up on my wheelbarrow, and I set off towards the South Lake. An area that I'd fancied was the Route Nightmare, not because I felt that I'd seen fish there. It just felt a really key area of the lake to me. You could see masses of water. But there was an area that was of particular interest to me, which was just to the right of the Route Nightmare. And there was an old fence there, a white metal fence. And I think the swim was called White Fence, if I remember rightly. And it was a very unfished area. It wasn't widely used by the anglers because you had the Route Nightmare, and then you had the sort of the Railway Lake Point and Peninsula over that way. So there was this sort of dead area between the two spots. And I don't know why, but I was particularly drawn to it. I don't know whether I'd seen fish there or it just felt right with the wind and conditions. But my gut feeling drew me to this swim called White Fence. And I remember getting my gear in there thinking, yeah, this is where I'm going to fish tonight. I went out in my little inflatable yellow boat. I think it was like a little, one of these almost like a children's boat. It wasn't appropriate really, but I went out in this boat and I had some corks with nylon around them and 2-ounce leads, and I went out and I found an area that seemed reasonably clear of weed, and I put a cork out there and I went back to the bank and I stripped off some 12-pound line from my main line off my reels and tied up some rigs, and surprisingly enough I chose 3 grains of Tutti Frutti sweet corn on each of my 3 rods. And I positioned them out in this area of clear, and then I went out there and I just scattered some of my Pescaviva sweet corn in the area and got everything set up, and I felt it looked about right, and I thought, right, this area seems to me like an area the carp might pass through, and that was that. And so I sat there for the evening and watched the water and made myself a cup of tea and did all things carpy and felt, I was at Wraysbury. It was my first proper session of the year, and I'd already caught one. So I was feeling pretty stoked, to be honest. It didn't really matter what else happened. Anyway, the next morning, and this marks the time and when it happened in our lives, because the next morning my mobile phone goes, and it was my mate Ben Gratwick. It would have probably been a little Nokia brick or something back then, but my phone goes, and it was Ben, and he said, "How are you getting on?" And I said, well, nothing's happened yet, but I'm feeling really, really confident. And he was on the phone the moment the middle rod went off. And I threw the phone down, and I picked the rod up, and I'm holding on for dear life. And I could hear Ben going, "What have you got? What have you got?" I went, "I'll give you a call back in a minute." And I'm playing this fish, and I'm thinking, this doesn't feel like a tench either. And it went back and forth and back and forth. And eventually, there's this dumpy looking mirror coming towards me, and I could see it in the clear Wraysbury waters. It's quite a nice light day, and I could see this fish coming towards me, and I thought, oh man, this is a nice looking mirror. It looks a bit bigger than the common I caught the day before. And as he's coming in, I'm thinking, this looks good, and in the landing I'm thinking, my God, 2 nights, 2 Wraysbury carp, I'll take that. I get this fish in the edge, and I'm looking at it, and there was 1 or 2 anglers about, and I'm very lucky that Steve Alcott was there. I was a bit blown away because Steve Alcott was somebody I'd read a lot about as a youngster, and he was one of my sort of heroes of the Dave Mallin and the Famous 5, those guys, and there he was in my swim. And he said, "Oh, that's measles, mate, well done, that's one of the originals." Oh, you could have knocked me over with a feather. So I had Steve Alcott in the swim and measles in the swim at the same time, so this was quite a lot for a young lad to take in. But anyway, so it was my first meeting with the mighty measles. I think if memory serves me right, it was 28 pounds, proper old Wraysbury fish, real famous fish. It was a fish that Dave Lane had referred to it as the Finger Bay mirror, and it was a fish that I went on to catch a few times. But yeah, what a great carp, what a cool carp to catch, and yeah, what a great first trip to Wraysbury that summer. It was a great start, what was to become a very, very memorable 1999.